Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, August the 26th, 2024. So for the last few videos, I've been talking a lot about politics, and to be honest, I'm getting a bit sick of it. I think I've said enough about JFK and Kamala Harris and Donald Trump for the moment. So in this video, I want to be non-controversial. I want to talk about someone whose birthday it would be today, and that is Mother Teresa. So today, Mother Teresa would, I think, be 114. And I thought I'd look at her chart. We don't really have a time of birth for her. If you look at her page on Astrodata, was it astro.com? There is a time given, but it's not considered to be particularly reliable, so I will go for a noon time. Now, she is a controversial figure, so just to give you a flavour of this controversy, I'm just going to read you a section of an article. It was written in 2013 in Foreign Policy by Joshua Keating, and he quoted the academic Sergei Larive as saying, "I think Mother Teresa was very consistent in her view of the Catholic religion. Everything was done as if her primary mission was to allow the sick and suffering to resemble Christ and to quickly reach the hereafter. So the medical care, or should I say the lack of medical care, that she provided were based on the cult of suffering. She likened the suffering of the poor to divine grace. So it was normal in her mind that her hospice was nothing like a hospital. It was for her to welcome the dying and accompany them in their death. However, she could have given them proper care. She had millions of dollars in various banks. Instead, it was used to build houses for her community and to send money to the Vatican. At least that's one view. Another view, in the Guardian newspaper, there was someone writing called Marie-Marcel Thekaikarai, who noticed that when she was in Calcutta, and I know it's called Kolkata now, someone was dying in the street, and she was able to get some nuns from Mother Teresa's mission to actually do something about it. So, what do you do when you've got people who are dying on the street? At least Mother Teresa's mission was providing somewhere for the dying to be looked after, for the dying to be taken off the street in some kind of hospice situation. So there are certainly two views on Mother Teresa. And yes, I will be looking at her chart and looking at charts of two British Aries men who both of them had a big impact, perhaps, in terms of her reputation. One of them kind of made her reputation. The other helped certainly question her reputation. So I'll be looking at those two charts. Those, of course, two men are Malcolm Muggeridge and Christopher Hitchens. So, okay, before I look at Mother Teresa, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, August the 26th, 2024. Now, just a reminder, if you are not subscribed to this channel, I would really appreciate it if you were to subscribe. Of course, that assumes you like my videos, because it really does make a difference and it doesn't cost you anything. And if you happen to like this video, I would be really happy if you were to indicate this fact. Of course, if you dislike it, I would be, feel free to dislike it. It's always interesting when my videos get disliked. There's always a few people who dislike my videos, but there are certain videos that get heavily disliked, or relatively speaking, but maybe this video not so much. I mean, I'm not talking about anything too controversial, I don't think. Okay, so turning to the position of the planets today, here is the chart for noon, and I don't think it's a particularly dramatic day. So if we look at the moon for today, the moon is at 7 Gemini, and the sun is sort of around 3 Taurus. I mean, 7 Gemini in New York. So it's a it's a last quarter moon. I haven't really talked about the phases of a moon in my videos, but in terms of the phases of a moon, we've had the full moon. The full moon was about a week ago, and sort of each quarter sort of takes about a week to go through. So we're coming towards the end of the cycle, and Moon in Gemini plays Sun in Virgo. That's kind of an interesting crisis point in the cycle. We've got Sun in Virgo, likes to do things in a particular way, maybe, likes to make sure that all the details are in order, doesn't want too many surprises. But then the Moon in Gemini might have different ideas. Moon in Gemini is quite into flexibility. I mean, so is Sun in Virgo, but Moon in Gemini kind of gets bored, wants to do something. Though Moon in Gemini can be quite talkative. Sometimes with Moon in Gemini, one can talk almost as in a way because one wants to defend oneself. One doesn't want to expose oneself. So what does one do? One puts up a barrage of words. So if people are talking a lot today, perhaps you should ask, why are they talking a lot? I mean, I know I talk a lot, but I suppose you can always question my motives. But words can be a way of deflecting from a real issue. You just talk and talk and talk, and you just hope that the big issue will somehow be avoided or ignored, and that you can get out of trouble. And really, there isn't a great deal going on. I suppose I should say that the moon does go into Gemini at 4:04 a.m. London time. So, the moon is in Gemini. If you're in the Americas, moon in Gemini all day. If you're in Europe, moon goes into or Africa, moon goes into Gemini really quite early in the morning. If you're in Australia, New Zealand, East Asia, then okay, the moon in might not go into Gemini until mid to late afternoon. So if you're Australasia, East Asia, then for most of the day it might be fairly Taurean, so there could be a changeover there. And really, there's not much more to report. Moon is trine Pluto, so as the moon moves into Gemini, it makes this trine to Pluto. Pluto, remember, is getting very, very close to leaving Aquarius. Just a few days left now. And pretty much Monday, we've got about a week left of moon being in Aquarius, so that will be interesting when it moves into Capricorn. And I want to do a video about Pluto moving into Capricorn, but I'm not going to talk about it here in this video. So with moon trine Pluto, this is the last trine between Moon and Pluto, where it will be in air signs. The next time the Moon trines Pluto, it will happen when the Moon is in at the end of Virgo and Pluto is at the end of Capricorn. So there is a change coming over. But Moon trine Pluto, it's quite a gentle aspect, and it may allow us to create a bit of change around us, or transformation perhaps, but we may not even feel it. And we also have Mars biquintile Pluto. In fact, you could say that Mars biquintile Pluto is the most important aspect of the day. Mars is at 24 Gemini, Pluto is at 0 Aquarius. So Mars-Pluto as a pair is about, I suppose, creating some sort of transformation. We perhaps put a lot of energy into something. We don't like something, perhaps. We want to change it. We're not comfortable with it. We want to knock it down. It can be also quite ambitious, Mars biquintile Pluto, well, the Mars-Pluto pair. So what does it mean when you've got a quintile? Or a biquintile? A biquintile is about perhaps having some kind of vision, something we have in our mind, this idea that we can create change, that we can perhaps overthrow things, and we want to throw everything we've got into engineering this change, like through an act of will. It's not something that comes spontaneously, though. It's something we try to create. We, as a thinking person, tries to create in the world out there. And so it is perhaps planned and maybe even organized. And it does lack a certain spontaneity. So if it was a Mars square Pluto, that would be a real insistence on getting our way and perhaps being quite ruthless about it. And it may be quite instinctual, but Mars biquintile Pluto, there is some thinking to do and some planning, and it's about converting what exists in our heads into what happens out there. I suppose it's like trying to turn the projector on, but a quintile, biquintile, this series of aspects, they're quite man-made, or person-made. I don't want to gender it, woman-made, however you want to see it. And it's about what we try to create with our conscious mind. Turning to the heliocentric picture, and here it is. We put the sun in the center of the solar system, where it should be. And I suppose what grabs us is the fact that today there is a heliocentric conjunction between Mercury and Neptune. So, it being heliocentric, there is a certain, how should I put it, uncertainty going around Mercury conjunct Neptune. People are playing games. They are pretending to be one thing, actually being something else. Mercury conjunct Neptune heliocentrically, I think there's probably a lot of lies flying around. People telling lies, people exaggerating, doing their best to conceal the truth. And because it's a heliocentric chart, then we're talking about something quite collective, and we may be thinking about governments and other organizations telling lies. We know that governments tell lies, and over the last few years, it's something we've kind of got used to, or at least they try to manipulate the truth and hide the truth, and that's the nature of Mercury conjunct Neptune. So we shouldn't really believe anything we're told, and we shouldn't really believe ourselves in some respects. It's so easy to jump to conclusions, think we've got the answers, but maybe we haven't got the answers at all. Now, on a positive note, the Mercury conjunct Neptune can be quite spiritual. It can be quite sensitive and psychic, intuitive, and so it may be a time when we can sort of start to tune into the cosmos and try to work out what the cosmos is telling us without ever reaching any conclusions. Not a good day for reaching conclusions with Mercury conjunct Neptune, but we may be sensitive to a lot of vibes, and we just might get a sense of where it's all heading in a rather vague kind of way. And also Mercury conjunct Neptune, it's very artistic and imaginative, and we can perhaps use our imagination and perhaps find ways of turning our imagination into reality. We shouldn't be in too much of a hurry about it, though. And Mercury is also, if you look at the planet, Mercury is also conjunct. Oh yeah, it's on. Let me get this right. Mercury is on the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. So you can see that Mercury is sort of halfway between Uranus and Pluto. So Mercury on Uranus-Pluto midpoint, that perhaps tells us something else, doesn't it? Mercury really is trying to push something through. So Mercury might be conjunct Neptune, which is a sort of the fantasy and the lies, perhaps. But on Uranus-Pluto, there is certainly an agenda here. So when you hear people lying, when you hear governments lying, you should ask yourself, what actually are they trying to achieve? What is the agenda they're trying to push? Because it's not just done for the sake of it, just lying because they can. It's about lying because there is a definite reason there. So we have to be really very careful about that. So don't listen to what governments say, and because they have got an agenda. And then look at Saturn. Look at Saturn here. Saturn, there's the Earth. So Saturn is on the Earth-Neptune and the Earth-Mercury midpoint. So that is about control. It's about people. Saturn is the controller. Sun, Neptune, Sun, Mercury, that is about controlling the message and really trying to deceive us. So we're getting the same picture here with Saturn on the Earth, Neptune and Earth, Mercury midpoint. So it's a complicated situation from a heliocentric point of view, really, really quite complicated. And there is this question about how we are being manipulated. Not we as individuals are being manipulated, but just we as ordinary human beings are being manipulated by outside organizations, and perhaps all of us are being sort of gaslit. We're trying to be persuaded that we've got our impressions wrong, that our cognitions are wrong, that we need to pinch ourselves and sort of think, how are our brains working? No, we've misunderstood it. We need to understand it someone else's way. And gaslighting can take place at so many different levels. For example, in terms of the city I live in America, I talk about this city and what I hear the city council talking about. It's always how the people here in this city, they've got it wrong. They don't understand. If they were to just educate themselves, then they'd understand things from the city's point of view. And of course, that is gaslighting, and that's the sort of thing we can expect with Mercury conjunct Neptune, with Saturn on the Sun-Neptune midpoint. Okay, so now I want to look at today from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, August the 26th, 2024. Aries. Aries, you're feeling, I would have said, quite communicative. You've got lots of things you want to say, and you, by and large, believe that you're in the right, and you probably are in the right, but don't be too sure of yourself. It's good to be sure of yourself if you're an Aries, but just because you believe you've got it right doesn't mean you necessarily have got it right. And so it would always be a good idea to check your facts. It wouldn't take much time. In fact, you could save yourself a lot of trouble by checking your facts. So if you really believe that something is true and you're going to communicate what you regard as being a truth, then I think a simple internet search would just confirm it. It's like me, and I know I'm not an Aries. Well, I've got my moon in Aries, so I kind of can understand the Aries approach. But it's like with these videos, I sometimes completely mispronounce things, and it's because I just can't be bothered to check how it should be pronounced, whether I'm mispronouncing I don't know, French politician Jourdain Bardella, and perhaps erroneously saying it's Jourdain Bardea or something, or mispronouncing Kamala Harris's name. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce Kamala, but there is a right way or a wrong way of pronouncing Kamala. Even with the I Ching, when I first started doing these videos, I actually was pronouncing it the I Ching as it's written, and someone corrected me, and it never occurred to me that it could be pronounced any other way, even though I was using the I Ching all the time. So it's always a good idea to check your pronunciation. So if you're saying someone's name today, particularly if you're in danger of offending this person, then just, check to see how you should say it. And also, Aries, do consider why you are saying what you're saying, what your purpose is. Are you trying to argue a point, or maybe you're perhaps trying to defend yourself? Because words can be a smokescreen. It's like you can be like remember that battleship in the Second World War? There's the Tirpitz, and the British spent the whole half the war trying to sink the ship, and all these Second World War documentaries, they describe how as the planes came over the Tirpitz trying to bomb it, this ship would just put up loads and loads of smoke to try to defend itself. And so with the moon in Gemini, you might do the same thing. You may feel perhaps you're a little bit vulnerable because you're not fully sure of your facts, so you use words like a smokescreen. You just put up more and more smoke in the hoping that the bombs won't hit you. But this wouldn't be a problem, though, if you were sure of your facts. And of course, it's so easy to check your facts now. And once you are sure of your facts, then I don't think anything can stop you. And indeed, Aries, I really think that you can express yourself with a considerable amount of power and authority, and I think that people will listen to you, and if they do question you, you'll have a good answer because you're properly prepared. And at the same time, Aries, we have got a biquintile between Mars and Pluto. So Mars is your ruler, it's biquintile Pluto. So I think in many cases, Aries, you're going to have something that you clearly want to happen. You've got it in your head. It's there. And what it just needs now is willpower. And I think that with willpower, you can turn what's in your head into the outside world. You can project it onto the outside world. Now, if you want to use your willpower, you have got to be quite focused. I mean, I know Mars is in Gemini, and Mars in Gemini can be kind of diffuse. It can go all over the place, but you don't want that to happen. Use the intelligence of Mars in Gemini and the communicative ability of Mars in Gemini, but don't fall into the Gemini trap of going in too many directions. Just try to be focused, because in that way, Aries, I think that there is a really good chance that you can have an idea, you can work on this idea, bring it into full consciousness, and then push it outwards. And in the process, you can actually change your environment. I hope for the better. I mean, it might not be for the better, but you really do have the ability, as they say, to be an agent of change. Taurus, you are, I think, in many respects, in quite a strong position. You seem to have a good vision in yourself of what you want and specifically how to communicate it. And I think, if need be, Taurus, you can actually be very persuasive. And it is a day, as I discussed when I was looking at the heliocentric picture, when people can be persuasive. Mercury conjunct Neptune heliocentrically allows us to be persuasive, although perhaps in a somewhat deceptive way. I don't say you need to be deceptive, but your ability to use arguments is going to be quite effective. And I think it's particularly going to be the case if you take a standard Taurean approach. Taureans can be really good arguers, but they do it by sticking to the point. So if you are in an argument, or you're trying to push an idea, for example, you've got to remember what your point is. Remember what the key argument is, and you must keep returning to it. Now, with Mars in Gemini, Moon in Gemini, there's a temptation to be distracted. And that's actually not what you want. People will try to distract you. They'll try to get you to talk about something else. But you're a Taurus. You're very good at being good at focusing on one thing. And because you're able to focus on one thing, you can sort of grind the opposition down, or grind the other person down, and they see your argument again and again and again, and they see it being described in different ways, but it always comes down to the same thing. And so I think, Taurus, in the end, you should be able to win through. If you really do feel that it's necessary to prove a point, and it might be that your focus is on something else. So, Taurus, if you decide that you don't want to engage with other people because you just don't feel that it's necessary, you can really work on yourself, and you can work on your own ideas. And actually, it's a day when many Taurians can engage in some really quite deep thinking, really getting to the bottom of things, and perhaps asking yourself questions that before you hadn't really asked. And if you are contemplating any action, perhaps next week, I know, or over the week, I know it's Monday, beginning of a week, but if you're perhaps contemplating action later in the week, it would be a good idea to just sit down and think it all, write it down. That's always a good thing for Taurians to do, write it down and just go through it, ask yourself what your motivations are, question your motivations. Always a good idea to question your motivations. And by doing that, Taurus, I think that you're just going to get a very clear sense of what you want to do. Now, if money is important to you, and I understand money may not be important to you, but if money happens to be important at the moment, then I think that this is a time when you can be quite effective in terms of pursuing your financial agenda, whatever that agenda is. You'll have a sense perhaps of where the money is, what you have to do, perhaps if someone owes you money, or you need to get hold of money, or if you need to make more money. You'll just have a sense of what perhaps needs to be done. And it needn't be too stressful. The moon is trine Pluto, so with the moon trine Pluto, you can just be very clear about what it is that you want. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You can have real focus, and by sticking to the same point, people will eventually agree that your point cannot be argued with anymore, and that can help you in terms of money. So if you're trying to persuade someone to give you money, or to give you a pay rise, or perhaps to lend you money, I think there's a good chance that you will be successful. And really, Taurus, that's about it. I'm not saying that it's going to be a particularly dramatic day, though I suppose one thing I should say is that very soon Venus moves into Libra. And Venus is currently in Virgo, but it does move into Libra. And I know that Venus in Virgo sometimes doesn't work too well Venus in Virgo doesn't work too well because Venus is fallen in Virgo. But at the same time, Venus in Virgo, it is your ruler. It is in Taurus, which is in Virgo, which is an earth sign. And so perhaps during the last few degrees, last couple of degrees in which Venus is moving through Virgo before it moves into Libra, it may be that there is perhaps some creative project that you've been thinking about, or maybe you're working on it, and you're doing the last final touches to it, or maybe you postponed it. You thought, well, you can't be bothered with it anymore. Maybe you should bring it back into focus now and sort it out, make sure it's not going to go away, because if you were to just wait and you've got something that's half finished and you were to wait a few more days, you might have missed your chance. So do consider what is perhaps unfinished, especially in a creative sense, and just make sure that over the next couple of days you do sort it out while you've got the chance. Gemini. Fair amount of activity in your sign, because we've got the moon in Gemini, and we've got Mars in Gemini, got Jupiter in Gemini. Of all the 12 signs, Gemini, if anything, is now where the action is. And I think that you're going to be aware of possibilities. It's very important for Geminis to be aware of possibilities. You mustn't be totally focused on one thing, taking the view that there's only one way of doing things, that you're stuck. That's not how Gemini works. That's not how Gemini wants to work. And yes, you are becoming aware of ways in which things can be done, new ways in which things can be done. And I think, Gemini, that you will be able to express yourself in a way that I think is very powerful, because the moon, when it moves into Gemini, it straight away makes a trine to Pluto. And so if you're not happy with the way things are, even at quite a trivial level, Gemini, then I think that you'll be able to make a transition really very quickly. And so you don't have to be satisfied with where you are or what you're doing, because there's another possibility, and you can make that possibility happen, and it just won't be difficult. And you'll find that other people are surprisingly cooperative. You might think they're not going to be cooperative, they're not going to help, but they are. You firstly have to try. And if you don't ask, you don't get. Then I suppose on the same time, if you do ask, how does it go? If you don't ask, you don't want. If you do ask, you don't get. That's how it works, isn't it? Sorry. But yeah, if you don't ask, nothing will happen. But if you do ask, I think people will be very cooperative, and people will understand what you're trying to achieve. And in most cases, they will facilitate it. So in terms of how you deal with other people and how you interact with them, it's just important to be positive. They will come round to your way of thinking, and it just is not going to take too much effort. Now, I should, I suppose, make a point about Mercury. So it's now the 26th of August, and in a few days' time, Mercury is going to go stationary direct. So already Mercury, your ruler, is starting to come to a standstill. It's moving very, very slowly backwards, and in a few days' time its movement will grind to a halt. And perhaps you should be aware of this. Perhaps your thoughts are starting to slow down, and the way you're perceiving events, it's all slowing down. And it's not that you have to do anything about it, it's just that perhaps you have a chance to sort of observe things in slow motion, and you perhaps have a chance to think things through, and perhaps review the last couple of weeks, where you went wrong, what your thoughts were, what your next action should be. And I understand that you may be a little bit impatient at the moment, Gemini. You can feel that things are starting to move. You might have, for example, have had a particular worry or a set of problems, or perhaps you've made a mistake that you're trying to recover from, and maybe right now, if you really focus on it, the solutions are starting to become clear. You're not all there yet, but you come up with one solution. Perhaps a few days ago you came up with a solution, then you had your doubts about that solution, then you came up with another solution which was close to that other solution. So these solutions are starting to converge. And over the next few days, more and more solutions will start to converge, and more possible solutions will start to converge. And it may be that as Mercury goes stationary direct in a couple of days' time, then things will all of a sudden become clear, and you will understand what needs to be done. So perhaps, Gemini, there is a little bit of work to be done, and you mustn't allow yourself to be hurried. You mustn't jump the gun. You're nearly there, nearly ready, perhaps, to take action, but not quite. Though, of course, today with the moon in Gemini, you are quite action orientated, and you are probably trying hard to come up with excuses to do something. You're thinking very hard about how you can bring things together and create a situation where you can do the right thing. But it's just very important that you don't force it. You've got to wait for the right moment. And I just feel, maybe, Gemini, that the moment hasn't quite been reached, but I do think you're nearly there. Cancer, there is no obligation. I think that is just very important to recognize that today. There is nothing you actually have to do, and even if you are under pressure, people saying you've got to do something, you've got to do things their way. You don't have to worry about it. In fact, it might be best if you don't worry about it. There are always times, Cancer, when you need to just sort of bide your time a little. Especially today. I mean, today, we've got there's a last quarter moon today, and Cancerians, with Cancerians, the lunar cycle is always important to you, and so with this last quarter moon, you're quite aware of the way things are going. You can see it. You look at what's been happening over the last week since the full moon, indeed over the last 3 weeks since the new moon, since the new moon at the beginning of August, and you're aware that you're part of a small cycle. It's a lunar cycle that is coming to an end. You can see with this last quarter moon if you like, the final crisis of the cycle. And when I say crisis, I don't mean this in a bad sense. It's just when two principles are clashing. It's like things have been happening over the last few weeks. You're now starting to really think about them, and you can see what's happening. You understand what's happening, but at the same time, you realize it's not really going anywhere. And so, for example, Cancer, there may be pressure on you to join something, or to become part of something, or to sign up to something, which may seem interesting and exciting right now, but it's a dead cycle. I mean, I won't say a dead cycle, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's coming to an end. You don't want to join something just before it comes to an end. You want to join something when it's new and fresh, when it's still got new opportunities for growth. But right now things are coming to an end. Again, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about perhaps what's going on in the world, how you're engaging with the world, where the pressures are, and you therefore need to just watch and just observe, just not feel that you have to be part of it. Now, Cancer, I'm not suggesting that you do nothing. I think in your own way, Cancer, you are powerful. Your power is, however, not obvious. People are not going to see it straight away. Maybe to an extent you're brooding, or there's just something going on under the surface, perhaps about you thinking about the way things are, perhaps feeling that certain things have just gone too far and that it's time to make a sudden change. And you can also really feel your own power. And it may actually feel, in a way, that you're like a large fish in a small pond. People aren't, the other fish in the small pond, it's a very small pond, perhaps haven't noticed how substantial you are. They haven't noticed how much strength you have. And I don't know, maybe they don't want to notice, but they're just ignoring you. And all the while, something is happening under the surface. I suppose it's happening under the shell of the crab, and it's getting close. You're almost ready to reveal yourself, perhaps. And that moment of revelation, it's not today, I don't think. Maybe probably not even tomorrow. But the moment is fast coming when you perhaps have to change from being one person. You're always the same person, but in terms of how you are looked at by the outside world. So some kind of transformation seems to be in the offing. You're getting ready for it, and that's reflected by the fact that the moon is trine Pluto. That moon trine Pluto is talking about perhaps the beginnings of an inner transformation, but right now it's not an outer transformation. But you've got time, don't worry. When your moment arrives, you will be able to seize it. Leo, it's a somewhat mixed day. I mean, on one hand, Leo, you are feeling, I suppose, fairly sociable. You want to be with people. You'll enjoy people's company. I think people will find that you're a relatively exciting person to be with, and you will have a surprising amount of flexibility. You can move perhaps from one person to another person, from one situation to another situation, and you'll be able to adapt very quickly. And that's always nice for a Leo, because sometimes Leos can be a little bit fixed in their ways. And I don't think there's anything at the moment that's fixed about your approach. I think you have, I would have said, a lot of flexibility, and I think that you also have a good understanding of the ways other people can influence you, and you're probably not too defensive about it. I think that you do accept people's influence on you, and you're open to the possibility that the influence might be quite fortunate. So that's one side of what's going on, but it is a mixed day, because yes, you can be sociable, but at the same time, Leo, you're capable at the moment of really quite serious thinking, especially when you're not being distracted. So when you're not being distracted, it's always nice to be distracted, isn't it? But because one doesn't have to address the important issues. But when you're left to your own devices, your thinking does become serious, and you can see that not everything is fine, that some things do require some careful thought, and you're perhaps quite good at seeing how things can go wrong. And there's nothing wrong really with taking that approach, being able to consider the worst possible scenario. And it's kind of quite protecting, because in fact, Leo, it's a day when you can actually take steps to protect yourself from sort of negative events. You can feel these negative events, you can see what might happen, and yeah, you can take active steps to protect yourself. That's certainly true. And at the same time, the way you relate to other people, yeah, in generally, it's quite nice. I mean, I think you can be, as I said, you can be sociable. People will like you. It seems to be working well, but you can't keep the doubts and the questions away forever. So you might find yourself trying to be happy, friendly, optimistic, but something slips out and you find yourself saying what you mean. Or rather, what's the word? You find yourself just telling the truth, the plain truth. You weren't expecting to tell the plain truth. It's just maybe an observation you didn't even mean to make, but you make the observation. And when you hear your own words, you realize that you might have gone too far. You've perhaps used language that was out of sync with what people were expecting, and at an unconscious level, it was perhaps quite deliberate, because it's not entirely possible. It's not entirely possible to just go with the flow. When you see people enjoying themselves, having fun, there is just this certain sense that everything is on the brink. That might be how it feels, that things are on the brink, that it may just be eat, drink and be merry, for tomorrow well, I don't say for tomorrow we die. That's not really what I mean, but tomorrow things may not be like they are today, and people can often be in celebration mood at the brink when things are just about to go badly wrong. But it's not about you. It's about the society in which you're living, and the fact that you are actually very aware of what's going on. And I don't think that fundamentally you take things for granted. And I think that you do understand really the impermanence of it all. And I think that is further emphasized by the fact that today we do have a last quarter moon. So the lunar cycle is coming to an end. We had the full moon a week ago. It was a surprisingly benign full moon, wasn't it? I mean, I know it was supposed to be square Uranus. I know that I was saying how disastrous it might be, but, it's been quite a quiet week, hasn't it? I mean, for many of us. In some ways, an annoyingly quiet week. But the lunar cycle is coming to an end. And you can see that. And because you know that something is coming to an end, that may just mean that you just realize that at some level too much celebration is inappropriate, and it's this time when things are starting to go wrong with this old cycle, but you're not ready for the new, because we're still a long way from the new moon. And so as we move to the end of the lunar cycle, as we hit this first quarter crisis, you may just feel that it's just time to sort of wrap things up and perhaps have a final blast of socializing. That might be one way of looking at it, because you know that in about a week's time, when we have the new moon, things are going to be very different. Virgo. It's a Monday, and I do think that many Virgos are going to be ready for a new week. I think that by and large, you're quite optimistic. Not everyone is optimistic. Some people are having serious doubts about the way things are going. But I think not you. And even if you do have doubts, as far as you're concerned, there are ways to get round them. And I think that it is a time, Virgo, to bring things to bear. It's not a time to hold back. And this may relate to the fact that it is a last quarter moon. The moon is in its last quarter. And what we've got here is we've got the moon in Gemini square the sun in Virgo, and of course this is the last quarter before the new moon. Yes, so I understand the moon is waning, and that may be a bit difficult, but what it feels like is that everything has come together. You can see things for what they are. Everything about this lunar cycle you understand. You absolutely get it. I mean, by the way, I should say that this lunar cycle ends on September the 2nd or 3rd. That's when the new moon is. And so everything about this lunar cycle is clear, and therefore you want to bring it all together and really make an impact. And this goes back to the fact that it is a new week. Perhaps it's a new working week. I don't know what you're doing. If you have a job, or if you have your own business, or whatever you're planning on doing, you kind of feel that now is the time, because you get everything. You understand the challenges, you understand the limitations, but you are ready for action, and you can, I think, use your Virgo abilities in a very constructive and positive way. So if things are not right, if you feel that your ambitions cannot be realized because of ongoing circumstances, you can make the change rapidly. You can see what's in your way, and you can clear it up very quickly, very decisively. You may or may not get help. It doesn't matter. The point is, you can do it. So, Virgo, I'm very optimistic about this. And things are made even better by the fact that I think your ability to relate to other people is going to be very good. It might not feel like it, but when you actually make an effort, when you talk to people, when you explain things to people, they'll respond very well. And it's possible that you can bring new people into the Virgoan tent. So don't feel that your social horizons are limited. They're not at all limited. And there are people out there who, they're very interested in what you have to say, and I think they may, in many cases, might want to become part of your plans. And I should point out, Virgo, that Mercury, your ruler, is slowing down because it's going retrograde, and in a few days' time, Mercury is going to be going direct, and that's further good news. This is a time when things are starting to happen, and of course, it is Virgo season. The sun is still in Virgo, so I think that it's a day when to begin with, you might not feel that much is going on, particularly if you're, I suppose, in Asia, Australia, or New Zealand. The day starts perhaps with the moon in Taurus, but the moon will eventually go into Gemini. And of course, if you're in America or Europe, Africa, the moon is in Gemini pretty much from the start. So overall, Virgo, I think it looks like being a very good day when you can really start to bring things together. Libra. So, Libra, you seem to be quite persuasive today. I mean, if you want to be persuasive, perhaps it's a time when you can really start to use your natural social skills, which Libra is so famous for, in order to get your way. And Librans in general can get their way. Not all Librans. I suppose it depends on your perspective. I mean, one often associates Libra with being the one who doesn't want to stick out, who tries to keep the peace. But, that is one view. Another view of Libra is someone who has a clear sense of balance. That's true. Who has a good understanding of a power relationship, but doesn't want to do the balancing themselves. You have an idea and you expect other people to balance to that idea. And, it's a reminder that some Librans, are very powerful. You think of Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher, of course, was a Libran, and she had a clear view about the way things she wanted to be. Or Putin, he's a Libra. Berlusconi was a Libra. Yeah, I think Berlusconi was a Libra. So one shouldn't sort of fall into the trap of thinking that Librans are just sort of meek, submissive people. That is not true. And today, you are not meek or submissive. You shouldn't be. You have a very clear sense of what you want to happen and what the world out there should be like. And through the power of persuasion and the power of manipulation, you can, I think, really make it happen. So perhaps, Libra, you should consider how you'd like the world to be. I mean, be realistic, but how you'd like the world to be today, how you'd like people to behave, how you'd like people to be organized. And yes, it really can happen. And particularly now, I was talking about how people in general, from when I looked at the heliocentric picture, I mentioned the fact that some of us are going to be very vulnerable to persuasion and to manipulation, and perhaps you can take advantage of this. But, you've obviously got to have a sense of morality. Why do you want to manipulate people? Why do you want people to behave in a particular way? What is your motive? If your motive is the common good and expanding the common good, well, that's fine. And at the same time, Libra, it's important that you are open-minded. Very important to be open-minded. You've got some of the answers, but not all the answers. And now that the moon is in Gemini, moon moves into Gemini, it makes a trine to Pluto. That perhaps gives you an opportunity to discover more things about yourself, about the people you have to interact with, and about the world in general. Be curious. But curiosity is not the same as being indecisive. Sometimes curiosity can mean be indecisive because, we're always trying to look at new facts, get new information together, and we look at all these facts and information and we never get anything done. So that's not the same thing. But it is good to be curious. And it just may be that something you find out over the course of the day that is interesting. It starts off being interesting, and then it becomes important. And when it becomes important, you might realize that actually can bring about some kind of transformation, some mini transformation. I'm not talking about anything massive, but a change in your perceptions and perhaps in a change in how you actually perceive the world. And that might encourage you to do some deep thinking. We think of persuasion as being something where you try to persuade someone else to do something. But there is a concept of self-persuasion when, we see something, we realize something that is at odds with who we are, is at odds with our view of the world. And then we're very conflicted. But it's at that stage we have to get involved in self-persuasion. We have to persuade ourselves that we don't have the whole picture and that at some level something needs to be changed. But our perceptions need to change, and a little bit, and not just not just our perceptions, but perhaps some aspects of how we see the future and how we perceived our future just need to be changed a little bit, and that can be the start of quite an important process. Now, Libra, it's important not to underestimate other people. Not all other people, but some other people. Some people are quite powerful, and that is because Mars is making a biquintile to Pluto. There seem to be certain people who it might seem as if they're not doing anything, as if they're not planning anything, but under the surface something really is happening. So maybe some people are going to be unusually quiet. It's as if they're thinking something through or contemplating something. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll see that something could be about to happen. So what are people planning? What is their next move? They, like you, have a strong sense of the way things should be done, and they may have a particular vision about the way things should be done. And I think you should perhaps be aware of this, because you don't want surprises, and you don't want someone suddenly making a decision and perhaps trying to impose that decision upon you, and you not being fully prepared for it. So perhaps you should, if possible, Libra, try to get some insight into what the important people at least are thinking and planning, because it may actually be quite important. Scorpio, you are probably in many respects quite preoccupied. There is a lot to focus on. There's a lot to work out, and you might actually be of a view that other people maybe can't be of much use. I mean, that is quite possible, that there may be limits to how much they can help you, and so that's reasonable. I mean, Scorpio, it's okay to be self-sufficient. Sometimes you have to be self-sufficient, and if you were to try to bring people in, it might be somehow very disappointing. And in fact, from a social perspective, you may be feeling the influence of a last quarter moon. So we're coming towards the end of a lunar cycle. The moon is square the sun, and then we've got September the 2nd, 3rd, we've got a new moon. And this last quarter moon for you, Scorpio, may actually be about how you perceive other people and your network of friends and who you've been socializing with. And you might just have a feeling that something is coming to an end here. It might be fine as it is, but when you look at some of the people some of the people you've been hanging out with for the last month or whatever, it's going to not last forever. And you can already start to see some incompatibilities here. Now, I'm not talking about important relationships, perhaps relationships you've had for a long time, but in other ways, incompatibilities are starting to make themselves felt, and you're having some very deep thoughts about how you and other people get on, how useful people are, perhaps their faults. It's all starting to become clear, and in a way, you're thinking that maybe it could soon be time for a clear out, to perhaps restrict yourself socially, or at least distance yourself from people who are very much part of the past. Of course, when you get rid of the past, you have to start thinking about the future. But it's not time to be thinking about the future. It's more about starting to think about getting rid of things, perhaps distancing yourself from other people. I don't like to use the word getting rid of other people, cutting out the dead wood, whatever. But you're in that kind of phase, a sort of elimination phase, rather than bringing new things in. It's not a time for bringing in the new. It's more out with the old, but not quite ready for the new. And that that will possibly take until the new moon, which is on September the 2nd or 3rd. So that might be something that you are thinking about. At the same time, Mars is your ruler, and Mars is biquintile Pluto. And this biquintile Pluto, 144 degree aspect. 144 degrees is an important aspect because it is 2/5 of the circle. So if you cut a cake into 5 bits, you're hungry perhaps, everyone needs to eat 1/5 of the cake. And you cut it into 5 bits. A biquintile represents 2 slices, and so with this biquintile, Mars biquintile Pluto, Scorpio is starting to think and plan and get a sense of what Scorpio can do and what are the limits of your power, but have you actually been pushing those limits? And I think, Scorpio, you will start to come to the conclusion that there is something actually you can do which may be quite dramatic, and it's all about seeing the process through with this Mars biquintile Pluto. Firstly, it starts as an idea. No one needs to know about this idea. Then it starts as a plan. Again, no one need know about this plan. I don't think it's a time for discussing your plans. Then, when it comes to once you've got the plan, you're perhaps ready to start to execute the plan. And executing the plan is really a matter of sheer willpower. You can exercise this willpower, and it happens very quickly, all at once, and everything has changed. And from your perspective, it is a change for the better. Now, other people might disagree, but that's not the point. It's about you. So, in conclusion, Scorpio, you don't have to be satisfied with the way things are, because that's not anything permanent. You can create the changes, and perhaps that's how you can see the last week or so, just over a week maybe, of the lunar cycle. It's about moving from the past to the future, and after the new moon, you perhaps will start to see those changes really start to manifest. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, it's perhaps another day when you have to consider what's going on around you. I don't think it's going to be very easy to be fully independent. I think you would like to be fully independent, but I think it's going to be quite obvious to you why you might not be independent and what the constraints are. It feels like every action you're considering has to go through another person, and that just can't be helped. And you might find it annoying, but it's quite possibly a key part of how you can be successful, and to recognize it. And maybe you've been recognizing it over the last few weeks. So over the last few weeks, you've perhaps started to consider what you can do, what the constraints are, and how other people do have an impact on that, on you. And I think that that impact is going to be very clear. You will see the limits of your power and authority, but at the same time, you're going to start to see how other people can help. And, okay, that might mean that you can see in yourself a weakness because you can't do something on your own, but, that weakness can be addressed because you can see how someone can come in, can help you sort that weakness out, and can then allow you to move forward in the way you want to move forward. So it's always good, Sagittarius, I think, to be able to understand what the limits of your power are and what you can do to change the situation. And yeah, you just don't have to do everything on your own. It's absolutely unnecessary. And you really shouldn't underestimate the power of your words, for example. I mean, the moon is making a trine to Pluto. I think that moon trine Pluto is going to enable you to express your frustrations. If you have frustrations, you can tell people what's bothering you. And I think people will listen and they will understand what you have to say. And in many cases, whatever the issue is that you're concerned about, you can sort it out. And as far as relationships are concerned, it is a time when you can bring new people into your life, at whatever level. If you feel that something's missing, you need someone in your life, I think there's a good chance that you can make progress in that direction. Maybe not today, but the moon is in Gemini. It is in the opposite sign, and tomorrow, indeed perhaps even late today, the moon will start to make a conjunction to Jupiter. Jupiter is your ruler, and so with that moon conjunct Jupiter, which hopefully I'll be talking about tomorrow, that I think is a fortunate aspect. Even though moon is also squaring Saturn, I think that moon conjunct Jupiter can allow you to really benefit from another person's presence. Now, I would finally like to continue with my warning which I made over the weekend. I did indicate to Sagittarians that they need to be careful what they say and using particular language. I would repeat that warning. There's just some danger, Sagittarius, that you choose the wrong words and you use words that might be offensive. They might be swear words. They might be excessively crude. They just might be plain inappropriate. So I made that warning over the weekend, and I continue with that warning. It still might be an issue. So be careful what you say, and perhaps also be careful what you think about, because there's some danger that Sagittarians start to think about things which are quite unpleasant. I mean, it may just be that you're being excessively negative, but it may also be that you just can't help thinking about it. It's perhaps the darker side of life, or it may also be that you're just influenced by what you read in the newspapers, particularly stuff about crime. There is a certain interest in crime here for some Sagittarians. They sort of focus on stories about crime, and how stories about crime can be very undermining, can't they? They can sort of influence people's impact. When you read about someone who's been murdered, or someone who's been killed driving down the freeway or the motorway, and it's some random shooting, it just makes you feel unsafe, doesn't it? And I think that you could be quite sensitive to those kind of news stories, and because they make you vulnerable. I mean, it's always reasonable to understand that we live in a dangerous world, but you don't want to be in a situation where you obsess about threats and danger. Though in a very small minority of Sagittarians, very small, probably no Sagittarian who's listening to this video, that some Sagittarians may actually be tempted to play with things which are a bit underhand, sleazy, even criminal. I'm sure it's not you. It's for less reputable Sagittarians we need to be thinking about. But again, that's not you. But that just is some small possibility, just in case you're a Sagittarian who's wandered into this channel and you're up to no good. I would be a little bit careful on that score. Capricorn. Capricorn, you want things done in a particular way, and I think today you may be a little bit picky. That's certainly possible, and if people make mistakes, you may not be especially forgiving. I think that's kind of unnecessary. You do have to understand that no one is perfect, but right now you may not be prepared to give people the benefit of the doubt, at least in the first instance. I think perhaps, Capricorn, on reflection, you will start to realize that to err is human, and that it just happens, and that if you give people a little bit of leeway, they really will appreciate it. But maybe, Capricorn, you shouldn't put yourself in a position where people's mistakes matter. In other words, Capricorn, you could take it upon yourself to make sure that everything is done properly. I think, if you try to do things in a team, it really only works if the team is completely on the same wavelength. Very often you've got team members who don't, each team member doesn't really understand the full picture, and they don't understand what's important, and it can turn into a big mess. So it might be better, Capricorn, if you took it upon yourself to do everything your way. It may be harder work if you have to do everything yourself, but at least if something goes wrong, you will have no one but to blame except yourself. But of course, you're not going to blame yourself, because you'll get it right. I'm sure you'll get it right. If you're careful, I'm sure you will get it right. So you're the one you can really trust, and I do think, Capricorn, that you will be able to do a good job. At the same time, Capricorn, you do have a strong sense of the way things should be done. Not just in terms of short-term routine tasks. In general, you have a strong sense of what should be done, how it should be done. And I do think that you are actually able to articulate this. You're able to tell people how you think the world should be organized. You won't mince your words about your vision and expressing the full power of your selfhood to a wider audience. It will be clear, and because of that, you will be taken seriously. So people will listen to you, they'll take you seriously. At the same time, though, that doesn't mean to say you have to tell them what to do, because if you tell people what to do right now, you might be disappointed with the results. And if you want short-term perfection, then I think it comes back to being about you yourself. It's really not about it's not about other people. You can't expect perfection in others. And whatever you're doing, Capricorn, particularly if it's just you doing it, I do think that you will be able to get it right. And I think that from a sort of a material and perhaps even financial level. You're going to really get to grips with things, and things will come to light. And if you see an opportunity, perhaps a financial opportunity or even a business opportunity, you'll be able to dig and keep pushing until you actually get in touch with it and you're able to make it happen. So, Capricorns, do have a good sense of what matters materially. So if material matters are important to you, then I think that you can really accomplish a great deal without actually there being very much effort. So overall, Capricorn, I think it's a day for, on one hand, being very clear about who you are and what you want, and being able to perhaps articulate some kind of longer term vision. But in the very short term, I think it's probably best that you just are as self-reliant as possible. Other people mean well, but short term, I don't think you can entirely trust them to just do it right. I think the only person you can trust to do it right is you yourself. Aquarius, you feel that you have very much got something to offer, and you may even feel, Aquarius, that you are the one. You are the one who has actually got most to offer, and in that sense, Aquarius, there could be a certain amount of arrogance. I don't want to exaggerate that arrogance. I mean, in a way, there's nothing wrong with being arrogant if you've got something to be arrogant about. So you just can't be arrogant in a sort of a general sense. You've got to be arrogant in terms of the specific things that you happen to be good at, the things you're really good at. That's what you've got to concentrate on. And if you're only quite good at something, then that's certainly nothing to shout about. So try to be very concentrated. And that might be difficult, because the moon is in Gemini. And with the moon in Gemini, there's a slight danger that you might find yourself going in sort of two directions. You feel you don't want to put all your energy into one thing. You want to put your energy into two things, maybe even three things. But I'm not convinced that would be a good idea. If you put your energy into two or three things, I don't think you're going to get very far. If possible, you should try to put your energy into just one thing, just something that is the most important. So perhaps you need to make a list, sort out your priorities. What is your number one priority? And what is the number one thing you are good at right now? Because that number one thing could be really useful and could also be really empowering, because we have got today a trine between the moon in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius. So that happens, that trine between Pluto in your sign, moon makes a trine to Pluto, and so things can be very, very focused, and you can take that thing that you're good at, that you're really good at, and make a powerful impact without really having to put a huge amount of effort into it, because it's natural. If something is not natural, you have to try a bit to make it happen. Then that's probably not it. It's got to be natural, and that's what the moon trine Pluto should be all about. And at the same time, Aquarius, I think that you will have a growing sense of what you are supposed to be doing and what your role is. And tied up with that is a strong sense of selfhood. It's how your selfhood links with the world out there, almost perhaps what you're actually put on this planet for. And because you understand what you're put on this planet for, and I think you're starting to understand that, then I think that you really can make powerful progress. And at the same time, though, not everyone's going to understand you. That is true. In fact, some of your actions today may be confusing. I mean, they're not confusing to you, but they might be confusing to others. They might just not understand what you're up to. I mean, maybe that's just the Aquarian thing. Aquarians like to do things differently. They're not conformists. Do you have to explain yourself? Well, really, you shouldn't have to explain yourself. But maybe it's also just a question of not drawing too much attention to yourself, because if you put yourself in a position where you have to explain yourself, then things are starting to get complicated, and you might run into criticism. But if you don't have to explain yourself, then things are going to be a lot easier. Pisces, I think it's a day when you possibly want to keep a fairly low profile. I don't think that you feel any great need to be sort of out and about. I think that other people are all very well, but do you really need them at the moment? The answer is probably not. And maybe, Pisces, you'll do your best work when you're alone, or in somewhere where you're just surrounded by a few people that you're very close to. And part of the reason for that is the fact that we have got a trine between the moon in Gemini and Pluto. So Pluto is in Aquarius, moon is in, as I just said, is in Gemini. And so from a Piscean perspective, the signs Gemini and Aquarius are pretty low profile. And so that moon trine Pluto is suggesting that your best work, the real transformation, is happening, well, almost behind closed doors. There's certainly nothing public about it. And so if you want change, that change does come from within yourself. It doesn't come from out there. And another reason for perhaps keeping a distance from other people would be that when you're with people and you don't really know them, and you don't fully know them, you might just behave in a way that is inappropriate, or you may even say something inappropriate. I don't think that you'll make necessarily good company for people that don't know you properly. I think if people know you well, that's not a problem. But if people don't know you well, then they might find you a little bit disconcerting. So yeah, that is another reason. And I suppose today is also last quarter moon, and the last quarter moon is giving you insights into certain relationships. I think that is a possibility. It may feel that certain relationships you're in are reaching the end of a cycle, or perhaps we're at the crisis stage of a cycle. You're starting to finally see what someone is all about. And it may have been hard in the past, but now you're seeing it with this last quarter moon. And it may be that you can see the end now. It's not the end yet, but the end it's coming close. Now, that ending might mean simply that a relationship needs to be changed, that every relationship has a cycle, and and cycles within cycles. So it may be the end of one particular cycle within a relationship, but it may be, particularly if it's a new relationship or a relatively new relationship, it may be that the end is close, but it's not the end right now. The lunar cycle's not finished until the 2nd or 3rd of September when there's a new moon. But perhaps, Pisces, that's something you need to prepare for. But there's no need to be sad about it. It's good, because you're understanding the truth of the matter. And because you understand the truth of the matter, you can start getting ready to move to the next stage, whatever that stage might be. And that's it for the 12 signs. I hope you found that of some use. And now I want to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. So, I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 9, the taming power of the small. So, taming power of the small is a hexagram which is advising us not to aim too high. And, we have to consider, what can we achieve? What are we trying to achieve? And we just have to be modest. And, it's not a time for, creating anything massive in the world. And the I Ching sort of says, dense clouds, no rain. That's, the I Ching likes to say that. So dense clouds, there does seem to be something going on, but there's no rain, there's no action. And for ourselves, taming power of the small, we should perhaps allow ourselves to be tamed by reality. We have to work in the real world, and perhaps the small is us. In our own ways, we perhaps are quite insignificant. All of us. And we have to perhaps accept that insignificance and work with it, and not perhaps see ourselves as being the initiators, at least in the short term. And there are 2 moving lines. The top line moves and the bottom line moves. So the bottom line is indicating that, we've perhaps gone as far as we can go, and it is time to return. Maybe we're in a situation where we've hit some kind of obstruction, and there's really nothing we can do about it. We just have to accept the situation and indeed be tamed by the situation, and then sort of return to normal, and understand that, dense clouds, no rain. We don't have the support and perhaps the strength or even the ability to actually see it through. Then the top line moves, and that gives a different view. The top line is suggesting that we are actually making some progress. We're not making progress in huge steps. It's a situation where we're making slow progress. We've almost made progress through being weak. By being weak and by being modest, we've slowly gone as far as we can, and we've done well, but our progress has taken place through our weakness, and then we have to know when to stop, because we have to recognize that the basis of our progress has been our weakness and our ability to compromise and not to rock the boat. We shouldn't have airs and graces. We shouldn't think that we've made progress because of our stunning luck and ability and all of this kind of stuff, and our positive forward-thinking, dynamic selves. That's not what it's about. And so we need to know when to stop. We should be satisfied in the end with solid but unspectacular progress. If we push things too far, then we could lose everything that we have gained. But that's not going to happen, is it? And then this hexagram, the taming power of the small, because we've got two moving lines, it does transition to a second hexagram. And what it transitions to is hexagram 48, which is the well. The well is it's quite a nice hexagram, I think, but it's a hexagram that is very much in keeping with the previous hexagram. It's about accepting our limitations. The well is about something that is basically always there. So we need to make sure that our resources are always there, something we can always rely on to give us sustenance and strength. And of course the well, remember, that's about water. The wells don't move. You dig a hole, get the water, take the water out of the well, and that's what we need to create. And so perhaps what's happening with the taming power of the small is we've been slowly building something up. We've done it not in a dramatic way, but we've known when to stop, and we've said, okay, we've got something. It's great. We should be happy with what we've got. It's going to sustain us in the future. If we were to take things too far, we would destroy what we were trying to create, and we would lose the well. So it's just a reminder that we need to perhaps be happy with small gains. And now I want to look at Mother Teresa, and it's her birthday. As I said, I think it would be her 114th birthday. And so Mother Teresa is was a Virgo. So that's Mother Teresa's horoscope. I don't know what time she's born. There is a speculated time of her birth, but I'm not going to go for that. I'm just going to take a noon chart. And so Mother Teresa is very much a Virgo. You can see that she's a Virgo, and you can see that she's actually quite a major Virgo. She's got Sun in Virgo, Mars in Virgo, Mercury in Virgo. And so 3 planets in Virgo. And I think that very much fits, I would have said, that what we know about her. Virgo is the sign of service, doing something for the rest of humanity. And I suppose that very much fits, and it very much, if you're a fan of Mother Teresa, that's completely supported by it. And Mars in Virgo, Mars is where you put your energy. I don't know if that Mars is projected at all, but if it's not projected, it's her Mars. So she's putting her energy into service, looking after people, looking after the dying of, Calcutta. I know that the name change, it's been changed to Calcutta. India wants to get over the imperial legacy, but I don't know, Calcutta just comes more easily to me. I've actually been to Calcutta, but I didn't go to, don't know anything, I wasn't aware of her mission. I didn't go anywhere near her mission. So that's a Virgo, and that does make a lot of sense. Now, we could look at Virgo in a more cynical way. One aspect to Virgo, when I looked at people with a sun in Virgo in a previous video, and one possible way of looking at Virgo is saying, well, the means justify the end. We have to do whatever we need to do in order to get to our destination. And so the critics of Mother Teresa would say, well, what she's doing is she's not actually trying to help the poor. That's just a side product. What she's actually trying to do is get to heaven on the backs of the poor. That's what it's all about. And Virgo can perhaps be very literal. She's a Catholic, doing good works and ultimately getting to heaven. And of course, in her case, she got canonized as well. So she's a saint. And the reason she was able to be so successful, getting recognition, being canonized, maybe getting to heaven, who knows, she did it using the poor and maintaining the poor, just treating the poor as a stepping stone. And and she's just been sort of criticized for just focusing on the fact that they are dying. And she's been criticized for having poor standards of cleanliness, using used needles. I think the used needles were just being washed in a tap. I don't think not necessarily anymore, but that was a criticism that she was made of it. They were just taken off the street to die, and they were just helping her on her way to heaven. And if you're into Chiron is quite strongly configured here. So Sun opposition Chiron. So Chiron, Chiron, of course, is about healing. So you would have expected Mother Teresa's chart to have a strong Chiron and to have Sun opposition Chiron. It's what she's trying to sort of bring to bear. Although that is a sun. It is a sun, and one wonders to what extent the sun is some kind of projection. The sun may represent the church, may even represent God. I mean, Christ. There is a view that Christ was a Virgo. There is a man called Percy Seymour. He wrote a book suggesting that Christ was actually born when the sun was in Virgo, and he came up with some good evidence for that. And so that might be the sun in Virgo might represent Christ, and sun opposition Virgo, Chiron, is what she is kind of looking for. And she's certainly very focused. Here is a woman who has moon conjunct Saturn. I don't know exactly what time she was born, but she certainly has a moon in Taurus and Saturn in Taurus. So with the North Node, totally focused, a real focus there with that moon conjunct Saturn in Taurus. Now, because it's a female chart, we possibly should regard her as being more moon in Taurus than sun in Virgo. Absolutely focusing on what needs to be done. And Taurus is very earthy. So sun in Virgo, moon in Taurus, I would have thought be very good for someone who is involved in nursing. Because, I suppose if you're a nurse, you have to deal with, the mess of other people, the process of people dying, the body, the earthy grit of bodies and what bodies do. And I suppose if you're a nurse, it does help to have a good sense of that. Florence Nightingale, she was a Taurus, wasn't she? She had her sun in Taurus. But yeah, Mother Teresa with her moon conjunct Saturn in Taurus, no problems with bodies. Male bodies, female bodies, dying bodies, all the mess that bodies create. I think that's something that Taurus can very much handle. And it's moon conjunct Saturn conjunct the North Node. That is very much what she should be doing. South Node in Scorpio, that's what she should not be doing. Maybe South Node in Scorpio getting too involved about the meaning and intensity and spirituality of it. It may be that the religious side of the thing is something perhaps that was not the right thing to be doing. I don't know. I don't know, because she doesn't believe in karma. She doesn't believe in she didn't believe in karma or reincarnation or anything like that, because obviously she was a good Catholic. So those are a few thoughts about her horoscope. And I did want to mention the horoscopes of two people who had a big impact on her reputation. So in the late 1960s, end of 1968, there was a British journalist called Malcolm Muggeridge, who went to Calcutta, and he made a film about her. And he was one of these people who was a convert. He was a convert to Christianity. He, perhaps been skeptical in his youth, but one of these people who discovered Christianity late in life, and he was totally overwhelmed by Mother Teresa, thought she was absolutely wonderful. There was he made his BBC documentary about her, and this BBC documentary really launched her. And he had his son at 2 degrees Aries, and like Mother Teresa, he had a conjunction between the Moon and Saturn, and you can see that someone with Mercury in Pisces conjunct Jupiter in Pisces, that is very religious. Someone who wants to be religious, who wants to believe in something, and so he probably really tuned into Mother Teresa when he met her. I didn't see any huge. I don't have birth times at either of them. I didn't see any major links between Malcolm. I've got there's Mother Teresa, and there is Malcolm Muggeridge on the outer wheel. I didn't see any huge links between Malcolm Muggeridge and Mother Teresa. But it's just interesting that, I suppose he was an Aries. His north node was on her Jupiter. So I suppose you could see Mother Teresa's Jupiter as being her religiousness, because Jupiter is a religious planet. So it was on Malcolm Muggeridge's north node. So his north node in Libra, somehow the Jupiter made her religiousness, certainly had a big impact on him. So Malcolm Muggeridge sort of really made the global reputation of Mother Teresa. And it was another Aries who helped smash her reputation. And that, of course, is Christopher Hitchens. I don't have a time of birth for Christopher Hitchens, but here is Christopher Hitchens' horoscope. And I mean, he's all over YouTube. I know he died some time ago, but Christopher Hitchens obviously is famous for being, I suppose, an intellectual, also someone who was able to argue very powerfully, particularly argue against God. I mean, that was one of his things, and arguing against Christianity, against Islam. He was also very clear, very good at arguing against dictators, like Saddam Hussein. He was a supporter of the Gulf War. He was a bit of a neocon, but anyway, that's not the point. Look at all those planets in Aries. Mars in Aries, Venus in Aries, Sun in Aries, Mercury in Aries. And so he wrote this book, totally critical of Mother Teresa, the missionary position. It's talking about where she went wrong, and she's not someone we should be admiring. And then on YouTube you can see he did a video called, I think it's called Hell's Angel, where you can, where you can perhaps see an alternative view of Mother Teresa's mission. And again, I didn't see any amazing link-ups between Mother Teresa's chart and Christopher Hitchens. It's interesting that in terms of the nodes, Malcolm Muggeridge's north node was on Mother Teresa's Jupiter. In Christopher Hitchens' case, it was his Neptune was on her Jupiter, and his Mars. You see, there's Christopher Hitchens' Mars opposition her Jupiter. So something about her religiosity, of course, he would find incredibly offensive. because he found religion in a way offensive, and his Uranus hits her Pluto. So the way she is trying to transform her little bit of Calcutta is something he responds to very powerful. So it's not just a little bit of Calcutta. Sorry, that's wrong. I mean, she has this mission, a growing mission. It's not just about Calcutta. I think even in the 60s, her mission was moving into places like Venezuela. But the change that Mother Teresa was trying to bring was something that got an immediate response from Christopher Hitchens. So those are two Aries men who had an impact on Mother Teresa's reputation. And Mother Teresa, she was canonized I think she was canonized in 2016. Now, going back to Mother Teresa's chart, so here's Mother Teresa's chart. Just a reminder, one other thing I haven't pointed out is that Mother Teresa has Uranus opposition Neptune. I mean, Uranus-Neptune opposition can be very spiritual. I mean, Ebertin talks about it as the elimination of a waking consciousness, but the Uranus-Neptune contact. But it may be just wanting to go beyond herself through something dramatic, a dramatic event, perhaps, which allows one to transcend, or perhaps being different, doing something that is perhaps unexpected. And I suppose, when she started her mission, I think sort of middle of the 20th century. I mean, I think her mission got recognized by the Catholic Church in 1950, I think, when her, what they call the missions of charity was when it really started. But she does something unique, and it allows perhaps her to transcend, helps her to get to heaven, and of course it has an impact on other people. But yeah, she was canonized, and she was canonized. Let's look at the chart of her canonization. So she was canonized on September the 4th, 2016. And of course, by definition, she was very dead by the time she was canonized. And so she was canonized when she was 2016. That would be when she was 100. She would have been 106. And so looking at what was going on, well, obviously she was dead by the time she got canonized, but what impact did her canonization have on her chart? I think what's interesting about this canonization, at the time of the canonization, there was a Sun conjunct North Node at 12 degrees Virgo. So that Sun conjunct North Node was exactly on her Mars. Now, of course, the reason she was canonized around that time was because I think she died on September the 5th, 1997. She died about a week after Princess Diana. So there was this link between Diana and Mother Teresa. People saw this as a link. I suppose if you were one of these people that thought that Diana was the Queen of Hearts and was the most wonderful person ever, almost worthy of canonization herself, that these two really benevolent humanitarian people died very close to one another. A lot of people were into that link. And so the Sun North Node conjunction on the day of, I don't know what time she was canonized, but on the day she became a saint was conjunct her Mars. And the Sun conjunct North Node is the way she should be going. And I suppose if you take the Mars as her mission, as her work, what she was putting her work into, I suppose that is perhaps quite fitting. And then we have got the date of her death. I always think when you're dealing with people who have become saints, it's always a good idea to look at when they died. And as far as I could make out, she died at 9:30 in the evening. I mean, I sort of looked, but in the end I asked, what do they call it, Chat GPT. I said, when did she die? What time did she die? Chat GPT was absolutely clear that she died at 9:30 p.m. I'm assuming I've got that right. If I'm not right, my apologies. But if she indeed, was it Chat GP? I can never get that right. But if she indeed died on September the 5th, 1997, that would mean that she had Jupiter on the midheaven at the time. Jupiter's on the midheaven at the time of her death. That is always fitting when you've got. It is a sense of a release, isn't it? When you've got Jupiter involved in a death, and Mars was square Jupiter, and of course the sun was fairly close to was conjunct. The sun was conjunct the North Node, and if you compare this with her natal chart, so she has her Mars at 12 degrees Virgo. So when she died, the sun, she had Sun exactly on her Mars, and Pluto was exactly square her Sun at the time of her death, very close to the square of her Sun. So, in a way, that is fitting. So her Sun was hit by Pluto, and then Mercury had just made the square to Pluto. So there is a kind of a powerful sort of connection there, and I don't think Jupiter is actually making any aspects to her chart. Jupiter is often seen as the planet of death. Jupiter, I suppose, is, in fact, Jupiter is, you see, there's Jupiter. Can you see that there's her Mercury and her Pluto. So Jupiter's making a sesquiquadrate to her Pluto, and Jupiter's also making a sesquiquadrate to her Mercury. So Jupiter is on her Mercury-Pluto conjunction when she died. I wouldn't have really associated that with her death, but anyway. As far as Chiron is concerned, Chiron was at 0 degrees 17 Scorpio when she died, and Chiron in her natal, her natal Chiron was at 0.9 Pisces, so she had a Chiron exactly trine her natal Chiron when she died, and so I suppose Chiron is a healer. The trine represents a very easy aspect, things happening quickly. I don't know what her death was like, but it would suggest that it was a transition, which was probably fairly straightforward. So those are a few thoughts about Mother Teresa. I could look at other stuff, I could look at the chart of, for example, of Baby Doc Duvalier. Baby Doc Duvalier, remember the dictator from Haiti? I mean, if you want to look at Baby Doc Duvalier's horoscope, Jean-Claude Duvalier. I mean, the reason I mentioned Jean-Claude Duvalier's chart because he was famous for being a donor to Mother Teresa's charity, that she had this association with dictators, but he was the one that people really focused on, and I suppose there's a link up between her and Baby Doc Duvalier. So Baby Doc Duvalier, his Saturn was on her Mercury, and I think it's interesting. So Baby Doc Duvalier, just remember, he was really not seen as a nice person. His father was Papa Doc Duvalier, wasn't that right? And so it kind of damaged her reputation. And so Bebe Doc Duvalier's Saturn was at 26 Virgo, her Mercury was at 29 Virgo. So it's kind of upsetting her Mercury. It's that might represent damage to her reputation. And look at the South Node. His South Node was on her Mars, so not a very fortunate thing on her Mars. So obviously her association with Bebe Doc Duvalier didn't really do her much good. And also look at Bebe Doc Duvalier's Black Moon Lilith at 29 Gemini was square her Mercury. and conjunct her Pluto. So he had an exact Mars Black Moon Lilith conjunction on her Pluto, and so he didn't help, did he, in terms of her reputation? But of course, she would take the view that the means always justify the end. I mean, that's Virgo. The means justify the end. Whatever it takes, money is required to keep this mission going. This mission is helping her get to heaven. It's helping her go in a direction she wants to go, and it doesn't really matter where this money comes from. It doesn't matter if this money comes from Bébé Doc Duvalier, who in turn had got his money from his corruption in Haiti, because that is how Virgo works. Sorry to end on a cynical note, but that's Mother Teresa. Clearly a very divisive figure, and I don't know what you think, but she is not, I don't think, the perfect example of the good person. That's what people do. They always say, oh, well, I'm not exactly Mother Teresa. Well, yeah, would you want to be Mother Teresa? I think there are problems with Mother Teresa. But anyway, I thought I would look at her her chart, because it would have been her birthday. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.